Hey TalkTickers listeners, ready for another deep dive? This time we're tackling Thermo Fisher Scientific's Q3 2024 earnings call.
Yeah, always a lot to unpack with these big players, huh? Trying to see what's really moving the needle.
Absolutely, and we've got the transcript and all the key stock data right here so we can break it down.
Gotta love a good data dump.
Right. So first glance, Thermo Fisher is saying they had, quote, strong financial performance.
Revenue hitting $10.6 billion.
Not too shabby. Adjusted earnings per share at $5.28. They're even raising their full-year earnings guidance again.
Yeah, but those headlines only tell part of the story.
Exactly. Got to dig deeper. So let's start with the market trends. Thermo Fisher mentioned, quote, sequential growth improvement throughout the year.
Yeah, basically each quarter's been a bit better than the one before.
So things are looking up.
Well, they're attributing it to improving market conditions, but also saying growth is still below their long-term expectations.
So thawing out, but slowly.
Exactly, and this is where it's helpful to look at the broader industry trends. Are other life sciences companies seeing the same sluggish growth? Or is Thermo Fisher an outlier? Something to think about.
Great point. Now, what about their performance in different customer segments? A lot of their business comes from pharma and biotech, right?
Right, key segment for them. Overall, it was down low single digits, but 5% of that is from lower sales of COVID-related products.
So still feeling that post-pandemic dip.
Yeah, but even within pharma and biotech, there are some differences. Biotech is actually showing more life than big pharma right now.
Interesting. Why do you think that is?
Could be their agility. Smaller biotech companies can adapt faster than the big pharma giants. We're seeing increased funding and confidence in biotech, which is a good sign.
This is something to watch.
Definitely. But remember, there's a lag between funding and its impact on the industry. Don't expect overnight miracles. And you got to consider the pressures on each of them. Big pharma dealing with patent cliffs and pricing issues, while biotech is more focused on that early stage research and development.
Right. Makes sense. So overall, cautious optimism for pharma and biotech. Now, let's talk specific product wins. I read their new Orbitrap Astral mass spectrometer is making waves.
Oh yeah, big time. It even won an award for being a market disruptor. Huge for anyone in proteomics and related fields.
So for our scientist listeners, this is big news.
Definitely. This instrument lets scientists identify and quantify proteins super precisely and quickly. It's a game changer for drug discovery, disease research, all sorts of things.
Wow. And for investors, it shows Thermo Fisher is committed to innovation, even when the market is a little shaky.
Exactly. Playing the long game. Investing in technologies that will keep them at the forefront, not just riding the wave, they're building the surfboard. They've also had good launches in electron microscopy and other life science tools, too.
Love that analogy. Okay, let's shift gears geographically for a minute. Thermo Fisher mentioned that China's economic slowdown has impacted their performance. How big of a deal is this?
Well, it's definitely on their radar. China's slowdown has hurt growth, but they're staying positive. They pointed to new government stimulus programs aimed at boosting equipment purchases and broader economic activity. They think it'll help turn things around.
Stimulus, huh? Haven't we heard that one before?
Right, and they're expecting the impact to be felt more in 2025.
So a bit of a wait-and-see situation.
Yeah, always a good dose of caution with these government programs, Their effectiveness can vary a lot. We've seen stimulus efforts fall short before, so good that China's trying, but I wouldn't bank on those projections just yet.
Got it. So more cautious optimism. Now, what about their clinical research business, PPD? How'd that segment do?
Well, they had a decline in COVID-related revenue there, too. But if you take that out, the underlying growth was actually pretty solid.
Okay, not bad.
Yeah, and they're really excited about integrating PPD with their existing pharma services arm.
Makes sense. Kind of a one-stop shop approach.
Exactly. They think it'll make them more competitive, offer a more complete package for their clients.
Could be a smart move. But you know what? We're just getting started. Back again with TalkTickers, folks. Still digging into Thermo Fisher's Q3 numbers. And one thing that struck me is how they managed to keep their operating margins steady, even with all the revenue challenges.
Oh yeah, for sure. That's a sign of strong cost discipline. Not easy to do in this environment.
Right. Makes you wonder, if growth does pick up, could we see some serious margin expansion?
It's a possibility. Like they're holding back, ready to pounce when things turn around.
Love that image. But speaking of the future, there were some hints in the call about what's coming down the pipeline.
Like those stimulus programs in China we talked about.
Yeah. The ones they hope will make a difference in 2025.
Exactly. And don't forget that integration of PPD with their pharma services. They're betting big on that for future growth.
Oh, yeah. And they were pretty upbeat about The order momentum they're seeing in bioproduction seems like a good sign for the long term.
Absolutely. Bioproduction is a hot area, all about developing and manufacturing those complex biologic drugs.
Which are becoming more and more important in treating all sorts of diseases.
Right. So as biopharma spending recovers, bioproduction could really take off.
So investors are betting on the future of medicine, basically.
You could say that it's a long-term bet, but potentially a big payoff.
Okay, back to Thermo Fisher specifically. Sounds like they're getting ready for a comeback.
That's the feeling I get. They're not just sitting tight, they're investing, making acquisitions, getting ready to emerge from this downturn stronger.
Why just survive when you can thrive?
Exactly.
Absolutely.
And their size, their diversification, that gives them an advantage.
How so?
Well, unlike smaller, more specialized companies, they're not reliant on any one market or region. If one area struggles, others can pick up the slack.
Like a giant ship, hard to knock off course.
Exactly. Of course, no company is immune to market forces, but Thermo Fisher seems well equipped to handle whatever comes next.
Okay, let's get back to those specific business segments we wanted to cover. What about life sciences solutions?
Well, growth there was a bit softer than some analysts expected, but it did meet Thermo Fisher's internal targets.
So no surprises there.
Not really. They emphasize that bioproduction, while facing some headwinds, is seeing good order momentum and sequential revenue improvement. Each quarter has been better than the last.
So in line with what we were saying earlier about the potential for growth in bioproduction as biopharma recovers?
Exactly. Overall growth might not be spectacular right now, but there are bright spots. And bioproduction seems to be one of them.
Got it. Now, analytical instruments. They saw 3% organic growth there.
Yep. Driven in part by those innovative products we talked about earlier, the Orbitrap Astral, the electron microscopes, those high-end, cutting-edge tools.
But they also said demand for their more routine instruments was weak.
Yeah, the more basic equipment is facing a tougher market. Not surprising given the overall economic climate.
So, two different stories within analytical instruments.
Yeah, high-end tech doing well while the more basic stuff struggles.
And what does that tell us about Thermo Fisher's strategy?
It shows they're focused on innovation, developing those high-value products that meet specific, complex needs. Being a leader, not a follower.
Makes sense. Why compete on price when you can create the next generation of tools?
Exactly. And it seems to be working for them, at least in some areas.
All right, TalkTickers listeners, we've made it to the final part of our deep dive into Thermo Fisher Scientific's Q3 earnings call. We've gone through all the numbers, all the trends, and now for the big question. What does it all mean for you?
Yeah, the rubber meets the road time, right?
Exactly. We can talk about financials all day, but how can people actually use this information?
Well, it depends on who you are. Let's say you're an investor.
Okay, I'm listening. Should I buy Thermo Fisher stock right now?
Well, first, think about your time frame, short-term or long-term. If it's long-term, Thermo Fisher's got a lot going for them. They're resilient, good cost control, investing in growth.
But their stock price dipped after the call. Doesn't that mean the market wasn't happy?
Stock prices can be weird. They're influenced by so many things. That dip could just be a knee-jerk reaction, Doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad investment.
So look beyond the headlines. Focus on the fundamentals.
Right. Ask yourself, do I believe in the long-term growth of biopharma and life sciences? And is Thermo Fisher well-positioned to benefit from that growth? If the answer is yes to both, then this dip might actually be a good buying opportunity.
Interesting perspective. It's easy to get caught up in the day-to-day market swings, but sometimes you got to zoom out.
Exactly. Now, what if you're not an investor, but you work in a lab, a research facility?
Yeah, what's the takeaway for our scientist listeners?
Well, it highlights the importance of innovation. Thermo Fisher's success with products like that Orbitrap Astral, it shows there's a real demand for cutting-edge tech.
So keep pushing those boundaries, scientist.
Exactly. The world needs those discoveries. And if you're in bioproduction, this call had some good news. Remember all that talk about positive order momentum?
Yeah, sounded like things might be picking up in that area.
Right. So that could mean more funding, more opportunities for those in the field. And for those in clinical research, that integration of PPD, that could shake things up a bit. New collaborations, new service offerings, maybe even changes in how clinical trials are done.
So plenty to be excited about depending on where you are in the life sciences world. But even for those not directly involved, I think Thermo Fisher's story has some wider lessons.
For sure. It's about resilience, adapting to change, having that long-term vision.
Qualities that apply whether you're running a company or just figuring out your own career.
Well said. So to wrap it all up, what's the one thing I want listeners to remember? Thermo Fisher's at a crossroads, facing challenges, but also making moves to set themselves up for the future. It's a journey worth following, whether you're an investor, a scientist, or just interested in this whole world of science and business.
Couldn't have put it better myself. Thanks for joining us for this TalkTickers deep dive.
And remember, we break down these earnings calls so you don't have to.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep diving deep.